What Culture, we love digging around video games for hidden secrets and revelations, especially if those tidbits are more than a little bit creepy. Back in January of 2021, we made a video covering off on 10 horrifying things that could be found in video games by only the most attentive of players. Turns out the most attentive of players absolutely includes some of you guys, who offered up a handful of other spooky hidden truths that would have been right at home on that original list. So given our mutual love of tracking down the nastiest Easter eggs and secrets waiting to be discovered in our favorite video games, let's dig into 10 more. I'm Jess from What Culture, and here are 10 terrifying video game truths you never noticed. Number 10. Horrible consequences. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Apart from offering up the opportunity to visit some iconic locations and characters scattered around ancient Greece, Odyssey also lets you make some genuinely interesting choices. Some of these have game-changing impacts, and some are more contained. Even those that won't change your protagonist's ultimate fate, though, can still be more than a little stirring. Early on in the game, you encounter a plague-ridden family amidst a burned village. They've been captured and bound by a priest who's trying to destroy the village and everyone in it, so the disease cannot spread to the rest of the island. Your choice here seems obvious if you're trying to be a good guy, as you can either let the priest kill the family, including their young children, or insist they be set free. If you don't let the sweet young family die, you'll be pretty chuffed with yourself in the short term. Unfortunately, in the long term, if you return to that island, you'll find out the priest was right and the plague did spread, killing a lot more people. It's pretty awful either way, and while not letting them infect the whole island is probably the right choice, walking away and letting a family get slaughtered certainly doesn't feel heroic. You also make your young friend Phoebe sad, which is extra crappy. Number 9. Black Soul Gems. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Anyone who's played Skyrim won't have any trouble telling you what soul trapping is. Kill off a creature or a human with the spell and you'll be able to trap their soul in a soul gem, which you can use to enchant or charge weapons. It's all very useful, and given there's a lot going on in Skyrim, you'd be forgiven for not thinking too much about it beyond the basics. For those that dug a little deeper or sunk time into the Dawnguard expansion though, it's hard to look at soul trapping the same way, especially if you're role-playing a good character. In short, it's very, very not cool. In Dawnguard, you can venture to a place called the Soul Cairn, a plane of oblivion inhabited by souls that have been trapped in black soul gems. These gems are unique as they can contain the souls of sentient humanoid beings, and said beings are really not having a good time in the horrible prison realm you sent them to. Not to mention, these poor unfortunate souls are denied the afterlife and doomed to eventually be eaten by the rulers of the Soul Cairn, the ideal masters. As you can imagine, this is all seen as pretty unethical, and you might start to feel a little guilty about forcing these souls to endure eternal torture just so you can keep your cool sword charged. Unless it's Nazim's soul, then I think we can all agree you're good to go. Number 8. The Fates of the Missing. Alien Isolation. Alien Isolation isn't a whimsical, lighthearted adventure, so it stands to reason a lot of things are gonna go sideways in your cat and mouse game with one of gaming's scariest big bads. If you haven't finished this one yet, I'm throwing in a spoiler warning, and I will catch you over on number 7. This particular terrifying video game truth concerns the ID cards that can be found throughout the station. Resident attentive player and What Culture commenter Black Winter pointed out that while some of these ID cards can be attached to nearby dead bodies, others are trickier to access, though all have a picture of said MIA person on it. Toward the end of the game, you will find yourself exploring the alien nest. Here you come across dozens of victims with their chests burst open. Each of these victims can be matched to an ID card, cementing that each of those missing people met with an especially horrific fate, being dragged down into the nest and infested with an alien. Yikes. Number 7. ROMANI and CREMIA. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. While Alien Isolation could not be more different to The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, both are more sinister under the hood than you might expect. At the Romani ranch, you encounter Romani and her older sister CREMIA. There's a couple of weird things going on here, the first of which is an alien attack you'll need to fend off, and if you fail, Romani roams around the ranch clutching her head. The implications of what the aliens did to the girl can only be guessed at, but I think we can safely go with it being significantly not chill. Perhaps even more disturbing is the case of Chateau Romani. Now, for the uninitiated, Majora's Mask takes place in Termina, and basically the world is going to end in 3 days when the moon crashes into Termina. Back to the Chateau Romani. This is essentially suggested to be the alcohol of Termina, as you can only buy it from the bar while wearing the Romani mask, which is basically Link's fake ID, letting him masquerade as an adult. In all other cases, children aren't allowed to drink it. On the night of the final day before the world ends, CREMIA lets her kid sister Romani drink the Chateau Romani, which seems to suggest she wants to get her little sister drunk so she isn't scared when the world ends. A level of depressing which I think we can all agree Majora's Mask has certainly mastered. Number 6. The real zombie fungus, The Last of Us. This is arguably the most terrifying entry on this list because it's the only one that has real-world implications. So, sorry if you're creeped out easily. If you aren't already across this one, it's absolutely fascinating. Essentially, the cordyceps virus, which is the basis of the apocalyptic zombie plague from The Last of Us, is a real virus. While the parasitic virus doesn't affect humans, the parasites do make their homes in the bodies of insects and other fungi, and some variants are essentially body snatchers, turning the creatures into zombies. In one particular case, the virus zombifies ants and controls their minds in order to survive, wherein the ant's tissue is eaten alive from the inside and replaced until it's only a husk overtaken by the fungus. They call these fruiting bodies, which is a lot more disgusting and less yummy than it sounds, but basically imagine what the clickers are but for insects and spiders, and you got it. Number 5. Spencer Jankowski's body, Fear 2. Spen was a combat operative in the first Fear title whose fate was left undetermined. He initially disappears after scouting replica forces alongside his Delta escort. After this point, he appears to the Point Man as a phantom wandering through the plant, delivering warnings about the game's antagonist Alma. Though you're told his remains may have been found, it's also noted by the Fear Commissioner that he can't be dead, as his life signs are unusual but present. Ultimately, it's never made completely clear what happened to Spen, but attentive players may have found their answer in the game's sequel. Though it's wildly unlikely a living person could present as a phantom, thereby essentially confirming Spen's death, the game never made it entirely clear one way or the other. That is, except for a body that can be found during the early moments of Fear 2 in an X-ray lab. The body shares several physical characteristics with Spen, including his shaved head, uniform, and lack of eyeballs. Worth noting he did have eyeballs previously, but not after the whole death thing. Number 4. Save Malik or Let Her Die, Deus Ex Human Revolution. There are plenty of things in games you can't control. Some you can, and others you assume you have no control over, but you might actually have been able to do something. The fate of Farida Malik in Deus Ex Human Revolution is the latter. Plenty of players carried on through the game assuming her death was out of their hands. Once the helicopter is shut down, you're told to run. You can kill off some of her attackers, but unless you finish the job and don't run straight for the helipad's elevator, you can find her body later on with the chip in her head dug out. She can be seen lying on an operating table in the Harvester's hideout, presumably having been sold by Bell Tower to the Harvesters. It's especially nasty, but if you save her instead, she helps you down the line at the Singapore facility. On top of that, you can later find an Easter egg in Adam Jensen's apartment that suggested the two grew much closer, so it's an extra bummer if you let her die thinking you had to. Number 3. The Emergency Alert System Broadcasts, Black Mesa. For those who may not know, Black Mesa is a third-party remake of Half-Life created by Crowbar Collective. Their reimagining includes a good expansion on the shooter and its lore, and has been generally well received. One thing it takes artistic license with concerns radios that you can find scattered throughout the research facility. The terror here is developed through what these broadcasts imply. The first chilling alert suggests that the disaster caused by Gordon Freeman at the Black Mesa facility is not strictly contained within the research facility and has affected the surrounding area. It notes that an evacuation order has been issued for all residents within a 75-mile radius. The implications of the second broadcast, sent out just a few hours later, worsen further, as it's now being sent by the State Department and not local authorities. At this point, it states that everyone living within a 150-mile radius should evacuate and watch for symptoms of illness. The final broadcast, now disseminated by the United States Department of Defense mere hours later, reveals a state of emergency has been declared due to an unknown hostile force. It adds that airstrikes strikes will begin over the Black Mesa facility, and the entire state of New Mexico should evacuate. People are advised to shelter at militarized zones and alert authorities if they have military or firearms training. Finding out through these broadcasts just how far the disaster has spread and how quickly is pretty darn chilling, especially when you can only experience it firsthand at the heart of Black Mesa. Number 2. The truth about Joker's sister, Mass Effect 3. Much like many of the games on this list, you'd be forgiven for missing this one, as it involves quite a bit of patience and hanging around to get the full story. In Mass Effect 3, you can have multiple conversations with the Normandy's pilot Joker about his sister Hillary. He expresses concerns over her well-being, given she's living on a small human colony, Tiptree. Hang around the Huerta Memorial Hospital on the Citadel enough though, and you can actually find out what happened to her. The full conversation between a traumatized Asari commando and her psychologist reveals what actually happened to Hillary. It turns out they met. Things get pretty dark with each returned visit to the hospital as you learn more about what went down. It turns out that after a Reaper ambush of the colony, the commando tells the psychologist Hillary broke her leg and wouldn't stop crying. So she killed Hillary in order to prevent being discovered by the Reapers. In what is perhaps the saddest part of all this, Joker never finds out what happened to his sister. Of course, the Asari is traumatized too, and you are able to use your Spectre status, if you listen to her full story, to grant her a gun, which she will use to take her own life. If you don't do that, she will appear as a war asset. Number 1. The secret of the generator, Control. Big spoiler warning here if you haven't finished Control and don't want to know one of its biggest secrets, but if you're going to stick with me, this one's a doozy. 2019 action-adventure Control is a game with many layers, complicated lore, and more than a few secrets to be found only by those who are really paying attention. If you make a habit of rifling through desks, scanning whiteboards, internalizing files, and piecing more than a few things together for yourself, then you might have spotted one of the greatest secrets of the NSC power plant. The secret being, NSC stands for Northmore Sarcophagus Container, and the oldest house is actually powered by the body of the FBC director before the late director Trench being the guy you replaced at the start of the game. Essentially, this guy is using his paranatural ability to generate heat to become a voluntary human battery. A monitor near the top of the reactor/sarcophagus depicts a human inside, and it seems to display an infrared view indicating body heat, leading clever players to connect the dots. Trench himself says that, quote, "A director has to keep the lights on." This one might have passed you by if you weren't looking for it, but it's a great, albeit terrifying secret worth knowing to flesh out the game's lore. And that's our list. Do let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other creepy video game truths you reckon most players probably missed. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm @JessMcDonnell, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.